All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining us for another edition of the Sunflower Nation, our special series, The Sun Will Shine Again. My name is Dr. Edith Banks, your host. And today we are going to be talking to a dear friend of mine, Shamara Green, who is going to share her story of losing her husband. And so obviously these are difficult conversations for us to have, but they are necessary and they help not just the person being interviewed, but also the audience, because as we know, we all go through grief at one point in our lives. And so hopefully her sharing her story will help someone in our audience as well. So Shamara, thank you again for joining us.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Glad to
This is
have you.
this is definitely an important topic. As you mentioned, it's helps me and it also will help your listeners who are going through grief because grief is very complicated. It's a very complicated process.
I definitely can relate to that. You know, as many people know, I lost my father in July. And this process, we were just speaking earlier, is a roller coaster. Some days you feel great, other days it feels like this cannot be real. How did this become my life? So we're going to go through that. So Shamar, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, but also your relationship with your husband?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I lost my husband May 7th of 2022. We were married for 8 years, been together for about 14. We were in the process of planning a family. I was 6 months pregnant when I lost my husband. So it was definitely sudden, a sudden loss. Nothing that I could have ever, prepared for. And being young, I'm only 37. I never thought that I would be a widow at 37. Um, so I felt like we had, this life ahead of us. So much we were planning for, goals we had finally accomplished, and we were in a good space. Great marriage. And so for him to be suddenly taken away from me, just kind of like snatched the life out of me. He was an avid lover of riding motorcycles. I kind of thought it was cool, that was the cool thing about him. But I always found it somewhat unsafe. It was unsettling. Anytime he was going out, I'm going for a ride, I'm hanging out with the guys. It was always unsettling. And I remember I would always say to him, be safe. And, after you say that over and over, it just sounds like something to say, but it was not. So it wasn't for him. It was for other people. Be safe, look out for other people. Because he was a great, driver. He didn't ride fast, and he finally convinced me to get a Harley. So when you think of motorcycles, you think of the fast ones. He had a Harley, so it's a cruiser. I won't be going fast, and we can go on road trips. You can ride with me. All the good things to say to get me to agree to get this motorcycle. So of course, I'm not into telling grown people what they can and cannot do. If that's what you want to do, I support you. But again, in the back of my mind, it was always that unsettling feeling that I really don't want you to ride. But if that's something you're passionate about, I support that. And something that he loved actually ended up taking his life. Well, let me rephrase that. Not that took his life. The fact that he was doing something he loved was the last thing he was doing. So unfortunately, somebody made a decision to drive drunk, pulled out in front of him, causing the accident that ended his life. And when I think back at it and I think about the grief process, you want to find something to blame, someone to blame. You go through anger, you go through hurt, and some days I probably wouldn't even want to tell people what I think about the person who caused this accident or my thoughts. because as a person, that's not who I am. But when it comes to this grief process, it really brings out another side of you, a side that I personally would not want to wish on anybody.
So
Um,
wait, let's back it up a little bit because
okay.
that's a lot to unpack. So you and your husband are together 14 years, married 8, starting your family, you're 6 months pregnant. Tell me about your husband. So you mentioned he likes to ride bikes, but what else? How would you describe him?
I would describe him as a quiet until you get to know him, an observer. If you see some of my social media and the times that I've posted pictures, he always has this stern look on his face, rarely ever smiling. But if you get him one on one or you get him in the room, he's like the life of the party. Um, he loved to dance. Um, he was a sweet talker. That's something that got me. Sweet talker, knows the right things to say, can be very, very romantic. Um, he loved family. He loved me, of course. He was a mama's boy. He didn't like when I said that, but he was his mom's only boy. And it was a tight relationship until, she passed away in 2018, which was a hard time for him. But he was just a life of the party, very sweet, quiet until you get to know him.
It's funny as you mentioned your social media post. I never noticed a stern look in that man's face.
Really?
Any post I ever saw was either you all on a trip somewhere or him dancing.
Yes, absolutely. Dancing. That was one of the things that people always said. He loves to dance. If there's music on, he's going to be the one dancing. Line dances, any ATL style dances, he's gonna get the party going.
Okay. How old was he when he passed?
41.
41, young man.
Yes.
So 6 months pregnant, your husband goes out for a ride, ends up in a accident. And not only an accident, but an accident caused by a drunk driver.
Yes. Yes. We actually just had a late lunch. It was 2 days after Cinco de Mayo. And he always used to say, you think you're half Mexican. Why do you always want to celebrate Cinco de Mayo? I'm like, actually, it's just the festivities. It's a reason to go out and have fun and, enjoy and party. So he worked as a CDL driver. So during the week, he was gone. So on the weekends is really when we would catch up and hang out and really spend time together. And so that particular Saturday, we had a late lunch. We went out to eat. And after he wanted to ride his motorcycle, he says, I'm going to follow behind you because I want to ride. It's a nice day today. So, okay. We go out to eat. We part ways. He said, still early. I'm going to go for a ride. I'll meet you back at the house. Me being 6 months pregnant, all I want to do is go to the house and sit down and, kick my feet up. So that's what I did. It was a normal Saturday, nothing different. I get home, just doing some things around the house. He called, checked in on me, let me know what time he was going to be home. And I proceeded about my evening, and I noticed I text and I didn't get a response. Typically, when he's riding his motorcycle, he'll, I don't expect a response right then, but at least he would with an iPhone. You can thumbs it up, love it. You can respond in that way if I didn't get, a response with words. But I noticed that didn't even happen. So the night, it's getting later. I'm
What
getting
time did
tired.
you send that text?
I sent that text about 7, little after 7. I was doing laundry and I'm getting sleepy. So I said to myself, let me text him and let him know I'm going to go to bed if he can just put the clothes in the dryer that was currently in the washing machine. And so I sent the text and I didn't get a response. So I said, oh, he's probably, riding, can't respond right now. So from 7, it went to 8, an hour had passed. Like, okay, he'll respond. I start doing some other things. But now I'm noticing it's like after 9. It's been over an hour and a half has gone by. It's unlike him not to respond. So I called, didn't get an answer. I ended up calling a friend because sometimes he would meet up with other people who ride motorcycles, and maybe he forgot to call me and let me know he made a detour is what I'm thinking. And I just wasn't settled. It was not a settled feeling. I go to sleep, I don't think about it. I'm I fall asleep easy. So, but something that particular night was not allowing me to lay down and relax. So I called a couple of people that I knew he hung out with. They didn't answer. Called his sister. She hadn't heard from him. So I'm like, okay, I'm getting worried. Now 9 is turning into 10 o'clock. He told me he would be home by 8, no later than 9. So now here it is, 10 o'clock. I'm like, maybe I should, ride to the spot that he usually hangs out at, which is about 8 minutes from my house. But I'm like, no, because if he's there and then his wife pulls up, they're gonna, think this. I'm playing all of these things in my mind, and I'm like, no, Shamar, don't do that. You're not that type of wife. You don't go out looking for your husband. He said he's gonna be home. He's gonna be home. So now this is me trying to talk myself out of bad
Talk
thoughts.
yourself down. Yeah.
Yes, we're thinking the worst. But then something was like, you know what? I'm just gonna have to be that wife tonight because this is not a good feeling. He hasn't even thumbs up my text message. So I called a friend. He said, I'm gonna try to call him and I'll call you back. So he calls me back. He was like, he not answering my calls either. I said, okay, I'm gonna just go around the corner. I'll let you know what happens. So the whole way I'm driving, I'm calling, no response. So the initial place that he told me he was at, I said, well, let me just do a detour and go that way and swing back around and go back to the house. Because if he's not at these 2 locations, then I don't, I have no other choice but to wait. And so I do that. And on the way there and back home, I'm steady calling. By this time, my call log is saying 30 calls now and still no response. So now, I'm getting really, really worried because now it's pushing 10:30. I get home, pull in my driveway. I'm like, well, what else do I do but go upstairs and wait to hear from him or wait to hear something? So I get up, I go in the house, I finally lay across the bed. I never really took off my clothes. I lay across the bed. It felt like maybe 10 minutes that I laid across the bed and the doorbell rung. So I hopped up and I look out my window and I don't see anything because it's dark. So I run down the stairs. I'm like, who is it? And they say it's Clayton County Police Department. And my heart just sunk. Because as you know, you watch TV, you watch movies, the cops are not showing up to your house at this time of the night to deliver anything, any good news.
Right.
So I opened the door and it was a male and a female officer. The female officer, she knew my name. And then she asked me, did I know Stacy? And I said, yeah. And she's like, there's been an accident. And I kind of like went blank. Like just everything was at a standstill. And I was hoping she was going to say, we took him to the hospital, he's okay. And she proceeds to say, we did catch the person and I'm sorry, but your husband didn't make it. And I honestly, I don't even think tears came out at that moment. I was in pure shock. All I can think about was, what am I going to do? What do you mean? Are you sure? So, but besides the initial shock, there was denial. I'm like, are you sure? He didn't go to the hospital. And so, they're trying to deal with me delicately, but I have so many questions. And then they're asking, is there anyone that I can call? I had just hung up with my mom. I'm sorry, not my mom, my sister, and I couldn't think of who I could call because, as you know, my family's in New York. So I do have friends here, but I knew the one friend that lives closest to me. It was her birthday weekend. She wasn't home. And I'm like, who can I call? Mind you, I just got off the phone with his friend, my sister-in-law, and, calling them to see if they had heard from him. But that's how blank my mind went. I couldn't even think of who to call. The officers got my phone and they called and they talked for me. And, people just started coming. I reached out to some of my friends. And before I knew it, my house was filled from 11 at night to like 3 that morning. His siblings came, our friends came. My parents was on the next flight from New York. They got here that next day at 8 in the morning. It just was so much going on that it was hard to even process. Um, I felt when people were around, I was okay, but it's those quiet moments that really get you. Um, but I definitely had a good support system during that time. And then the next day you wake up and it's like, this is not a dream. This is my reality. Where do I go from here? And again, being pregnant, thinking about my child who will never get to meet their dad, how happy he was. I posted a video on social media. So I found out in December, um, the December before he passed, and I told him, and I look at the video because it helps me smile now. I think he was more excited than I was. And so I felt like he was also robbed of that opportunity. Um, Granted, he does have a daughter, but us to have a family together, he was robbed of that opportunity. Um, and that saddens me. That makes me feel sad as well. Um, some days I'm like, you know what? I can deal with my emotions, but it's unfair to him. You know, he doesn't know. I honestly believe the condition of the dead, he does not know, he does not feel. However, being his wife, us being one, I feel like I take on those feelings. And so, I mean, it's hard. It's very, very hard.
So I imagine, just like you said, in the initial moments, first couple days and weeks, everyone is there and flooding you. And it feels good in some regards, I'm imagining, at least in my situation, to have people around. But in some ways also you want them to leave so that you can process, like, what is this real? Like, what does my life really look like now? What was your biggest fear?
How would I deliver my baby without him there by my side? We joked about, the delivery and how much pain I would be, and him telling me he would be joking, and me telling him I'm going to tell them to put you out because you can't be, laughing and joking around in the delivery room. So my biggest fear was, what do I do next? How do I continue to move forward without someone that I've been with for most of my adulthood? That was my biggest fear. I could not see past the moment, let alone try to think months or years down the line. And it's one of those things you wonder. So you lose someone, but the world continues to go on. Everything around you keeps going. It doesn't stop. Um, and you're the one that's still stuck in that time, that moment, and you can't see how you're going to move forward.
So I think your story is unique in that, as far as I'm concerned, your husband was killed. And by a drunk driver. Like, car accidents happen,
Right.
and sometimes there are fatalities, and that's always obviously unfortunate. But I think an accident is very different than a drunk driver, because I think you're making a conscious decision when you drink and you have to drive, and you're making a conscious decision to get behind that wheel.
Absolutely.
So how do you process that piece of it?
That's a good question. I think it just depends on the day. It depends on how I'm feeling. It depends on what's going on in the moment. Because some days the rational side of my mind processes, okay, yes, this person drank, made a choice to drive, but my husband wasn't the target, so to speak. He didn't know my husband. He didn't, say, hey, I'm going to go out and drink and drive and specifically kill Stacy. But at the same time, if it wasn't him, it could have been anyone else. So I think on my better days, I'm able to, I don't want to use the word forgive because I'm not there yet. I don't think I don't forgive him. I don't even think I have anything nice to say about this person.
Was the person arrested?
He was arrested. However, he bonded out within 24 hours. And he's been out ever since. I'm just now in the process after over a year, we are just now making progress with the courts, him being formally indicted. And now because he decided to plead not guilty, we're facing a trial. Exactly.
Plead not guilty?
Yes. Plead
And
not guilty.
so I'm going to go back a little bit. So police come, they tell you he was in an accident and they caught the driver, right? So caught the driver to me means the person, did he try to drive off or did he stop?
So I guess because he stopped, and he was arrested, and they said that he consented to a blood alcohol content level test, and that he was, going to be taken to jail. However, the justice system, different strokes for different folks is what I like to say. It's not just one fits all situation. And because I've been told he didn't have any prior record, that is his right to get a bond. So he was given a bond, presented in front of the judge, given a bond, and he satisfied that bond. So therefore, they were able to release him from jail with some conditions, such as not leaving the state, no contact with the victim's family, and I believe he had to surrender his passport. I'm not 100% positive, but those were the only stipulations upon his release. And since then, he's kind of just been living his life. Hasn't spent any time in jail except for the little bit of time when he was first arrested.
Do you know how high his blood alcohol content was in relation to what is legal?
Yeah, I don't know. And the reason I don't know is because it's evidence in a pending investigation. So there are some information that they have not shared with me because it will be presented in court. However, I'm confident that this is a strong case because fortunately the restaurant that he was leaving from, where he made, not only was he intoxicated, but he made an illegal turn, they have cameras. And so the cameras shows everything, from the time he walked into the restaurant to the time he left, to the time he got in his car, to the time he drove out, and the actual accident itself.
Wow.
So
it's as he was leaving the restaurant.
As he was leaving the restaurant. So it's like I said, pending case. So some information they have not shared with me, but that little bit of information they have, and I do know that it's a strong case. And so him pleading not guilty is partly because he does not know the evidence that is against
him. I'm dumbfounded by that you would have the audacity to plead not guilty. Do you know how old he was or age range? Was this a young person?
60 years old. Someone old enough to know better.
Right.
Someone
I was waiting for you to say a 23-year-old. You know what I mean? Young and reckless and, doesn't necessarily understand the consequences of their behaviors, but 60 years old, you're good and grown.
Absolutely. You should already know. You should have better judgment than that. So yeah, 60 years old, and made a decision to drink and drive, which resulted in my husband's death.
How was the rest of your pregnancy?
A blur. I think the last 3 months I was just trying to do what I needed to do to make sure I got her here safely. there was some moments that I smiled. My baby shower brought me a lot of joy, which I had actually considered not even doing anymore. Um, my family planned it. He was excited for that. Um, and so in my mind, I'm thinking, how do I have this joyous occasion to celebrate um, the birth of my child without him here? But as some time went on and I processed and kind of thought, what would he want me to do? I decided to go ahead and tell my family to still have it. And it actually turned out very nice. Lots of support. Um, and so I did have a good time. And when I think back on it, I'm glad that I did decide to tell my family to still do it because it was great. I had a really nice time. And so
It-
after that, like I said, it doctor's appointments and things like that, and got to a point. Of course, it's like, okay, I'm ready to give birth now, getting big, and everything is aching, and so it it was okay. It was okay.
when you think about pregnancy, generally, we think that it's supposed to be like a joyous time in your life. Um, I just can't even imagine, the 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 various emotions that you feel. You're still carrying life, right? This is your first child.
Yes,
So in some ways all of it is new to you, right? When you reach that third trimester, that's so exciting. And although you're exhausted and you're achy, it's still like exciting. When you're setting up the nursery, that's exciting.
you're right.
But then there's also like this heaviness to it, that the person that you imagine to walk this journey with, who was going to set up the crib and who was going to, carry the gifts up the stairs.
Right.
That person's not there.
Yes, and again, I talk about support. I've mentioned support a few times, and on this journey, it's important that you have that support. Um, and there were some things that we were able to plan before his untimely death, naming our daughter, the colors of the nursery. So there are some things that he still was able to have some input on, and that we were able to do together. So my support system, I didn't have the energy. I knew that my baby needed a nursery, but the joy in actually um, creating the nursery, painting, putting the crib together, putting her clothes in the closet, um, that no longer felt like joy to me because, like you said, this person that I imagined would be walking this journey with me is no longer here. I remember I went to New York to visit shortly after the baby shower for about a week, and about six of my friends came in. They put the stroller together, they put the crib together, they painted the nursery, they put her name up on the wall. And so I came back, and the things that I was dreading doing were already done. So that felt like a load off of me. I was happy that they were there to support me. They were able to help me in that way. Um, because I mean, eventually I would have got around to doing it. I just wasn't as enthused to do it. So they came in when I needed them the most.
That's a blessing. That's a blessing to have good friends that will hold you up when you don't feel like you can.
Absolutely.
How has all of this affected your relationships with other people and how you just look at relationships? Do you think you would ever remarry? But even outside of romantic relationships, just relationships in general.
Um, Relationships in general. So my husband and I, we had a group of friends. We considered ourselves the marriage crew. So there was six of us, including my husband, and we all together we have a relationship, but then within the dynamics of our friendships, some are closer than others. And the guys would call, and of course, if the wife has done something wrong, they're chatting about that, or the wives are getting on their nerves. So in that aspect, when it came to after my husband passing away, I felt like I was the one telling them, whatever you're going through, it's minor. You're not going to remember it in the morning. If something happens to them, you're going to wish that they got on your nerves. You're going to wish that they left the socks around. It's those little small things that we don't realize until a person is gone. So I found myself becoming the one telling everybody, don't worry about it. It's no, it's no big deal. Don't sweat it. Um, in terms of me personally and ever remarrying or getting in a relationship, um, I really don't think I want to be remarried again. I know people say that I'm young and, you know, there's opportunity for love again. But when I think about that, it gives me an unsettling feeling. So that alone tells me I'm not ready. Of course, never say never. But if I had to give you an answer in this moment, I don't see myself remarrying. Now, don't get me wrong, there are times where I wish that I had someone to do things with, or, get someone say, get dressed up, we're going out. Um, or someone just to talk with on an intimate level. But then when I think about all of those things, there's some form of guilt there. Like, how can I have that type of relationship with someone that I had with my husband? And so I'm in that stage of comparing the two. And as long as I'm comparing, it's not going to work. It's not going to give someone else a fair opportunity. So I think about that as well. Um, so I'm just kind of working my way through that. Um, and then I think about if I wanted more kids, and I go down a rabbit hole. Let me tell you, I will go down a rabbit hole if I allow myself to. Um, I start to think about my kids having different fathers. And then if I did get remarried, they would have a different last name than my daughter. And I wouldn't want that person to adopt my daughter because I need her to remain with her father's identity. I get lost in my thoughts. I can tell you that. I definitely get lost in my thoughts. Um, and I tried to, the way that I bring myself back, I tell myself that's not anything I have to worry about right now. It's not in front of me. I'm not presented with any of this. There's no decisions that have to be made right now. I just need to worry about myself, my healing process, raising my daughter, making sure she has the best version of me.
Do you feel like that's helped you?
In some ways, I do. I really feel like she's definitely a blessing, because if I did not have her to care for, to love, um, I'm not sure where I would be. I'm not sure what this process would have been for me. Um, but having someone to care for, being a mom, it forces me to do some things that I may not want to do on a particular day.
Right.
But I have someone depending on me. So, I get up and put my best foot forward. I do think that even though she's only 12 months old, I think she can sense when I'm not feeling my best. There's some days I could be crying and she'll just come over to me and she go, mwah, mwah.
Oh, just melt your heart.
Exactly. So I'm like, she feels it. So I'm a person that's in tune with my emotions. So I don't want to necessarily hide it from her. But I also don't want her to remember mommy was always sad. So I try to balance it out. I point to pictures of her dad and say dad, so she'll know who he is as well, because I know the questions will come soon enough when she can begin talking and processing. Because even my niece, who is 3 years old, she remembers Uncle Stacy. She was visiting about 2 weeks ago, and his car is still in the driveway. And so we getting in the car, and she's like, I miss Uncle Stacy. So it's
Oh,
just, it's just
yeah.
random, and those things catch me off guard. I could be thinking, I'm doing good today, and then something like that happens, and it's like, this is my reality. It's a really harsh reality. It really is.
Do you ever feel angry with him?
I do. I absolutely do. When I first started this grief journey, there was a woman who mentioned to me, she says, you're going to go through a period where you're angry at him. And I'm thinking, like, how is that possible? How can I be angry at him? He didn't do anything. What I'm angry at is, why did you have to love motorcycles? Why you didn't love golf or, bowling or skating or anything other than motorcycles? And I get angry at that. I get angry at the times that I've said to him, "You don't need a motorcycle. Why you want a motorcycle?" And he was just so persistent about getting it. Um, Nobody ever thinks, you never think that today is going to be my day that I don't make it back home. That's just the reality. And so when we parted ways, he joked around and he left to go do what he loved to do, never thinking that that would be his last ride, me never thinking that'll be the last time that I see him. Um, so I try to think to myself, you like, you know, hanging out with your friends, traveling, going on vacation. So that means I'm frequently on planes. If something was to happen to me in a plane accident, I mean, I'm not thinking that when I'm booking a trip,
Right.
to go
It's
out
not
the
like you asked for it.
right.
Yeah.
So I try to, tell myself, you know, don't be upset. It's not like he asked for it. It's not like he bought the motorcycle to know that this was going to happen. But yes, I've been through that feeling of anger and angry at him for sure.
If you could have one final conversation with him, what would you want to talk about? What would you want to say to him?
That's a loaded question. That
That
is
I asked this question in every single interview, and everybody says that same thing. That's a loaded question.
that is a loaded question. Um, if it was only one thing that I can say or that I could talk about, um, how much, just to let him know how much I care for and I loved him and what he meant to me. After being with someone for so long, I think that sometimes gets lost if you don't make that conscious effort to remind that person, why you fell in love. Yeah, you could be in a good space. Things are going well, but sometimes if you don't say it, sometimes they don't know. And I know my husband was we took the love language test one time. And his love language is physical touch and words of affirmation. Um, and I can say that I probably fell short on words of affirmation from time to time. Um, and so I would really want him to know what he meant to me, and that losing him is nothing that I would ever even imagine. You just think you're gonna, grow old with that person.
Right.
Um, and I don't, maybe if he was sick, maybe, if there was something that was worked up to, it would be different. But, I don't know. I just wonder if it would be a different process, um, if it wasn't so sudden.
Do you think getting a guilty verdict is going to bring some closure to this for you?
Slightly. And I say slightly because the guilty verdict is not going to bring him back, obviously. But then I also feel like that chapter is closed. So, like right now, during the court process, I'm fighting. I'm advocating for what I want to see happen. I want them to remember my husband's name. I want them to know who he is. So there's a sense of fight in me during this whole process. Once that's finally said and done, it's almost like, now what do I do? I don't have anything, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm
Yeah, I
making
think that will actually start a whole new grieving process.
yes, yes, because I have this drive behind me. I have this fight. I need to see it through. But once it's said and done, it's closing a chapter, it's making things more final. And now it's like, okay, here I am. My husband is really gone. This person, is guilty in jail. Now what?
Now,
So
in the unlikely circumstance that this person is acquitted of the charges, what would that do to you?
I think it would make me more angry. More angry that no one has been held accountable um, for their action. He hasn't been held accountable for his actions. Um, and I would feel like I'm grieving all over again. Like, here we are going through this situation. Nobody's being held accountable. I'm the only one suffering. And these individuals are going on about their life. The defendant, the lawyers, the prosecutors, the judge, the jurors, everybody. They don't feel the daily pain that I have to feel. And that bothers me in some way. And I always say you really don't understand what a person is going through until you've been through it yourself. So, God forbid it was one of their spouses. Would you respond differently? Would you
Right.
have a little bit more passion behind it? Um, it's just one of those things where you really don't know until you've gone through it yourself. I can try to explain it till my face turns blue, but you're not gonna get it. You're not gonna understand.
I ask both questions because I want to know, have you prepared yourself for either of the two outcomes?
I like to tell myself that I have, but I feel like I won't know until it actually happens. Um, Again, it depends on the day. It depends on my thought process. It depends on where I am, what I'm going through. Because some days I want to say I'll be okay either way. And then some days I'm like, no, I'm not going to be okay either way. So it wavers.
Well, I would think that you are going to be okay either way. You're just going to be pissed one way. Because as you were talking about, sometimes whether you want to get up or not, you have responsibilities to your child. And so you still have to get up. I was talking to another woman who also lost her husband, but they didn't have children. And she says to me, I have no reason to get up. And I get it. Because I'm telling her, with my dad's loss, there were days that I felt like I don't want to get out of this bed. Like I have no desire to do anything. But
Right.
then I look at my son who's like, "Ma, what's for dinner?" And I'm like, boy, you're 14. Like, go make some spaghetti, right? But
Right.
even with a 14-year-old, I'm forced to get up to do something. You have a 1-year-old, so you definitely have to get up to do
There's
stuff.
no question about that.
But someone who loses a spouse and doesn't have children, is there any advice you would give to that person as to, how to deal with that loss?
The best advice that I think I can give is take it a moment at a time. So if it is those days that you don't feel like you want to get out of bed, embrace that. Now don't let it last. You don't want to be days and upon days in the bed, but I've learned to take the emotions as they come. Some days in the beginning, I would suppress the tears because I'm a person who, whether it's talking about something or doing the same thing over and over without change, it drives me crazy. It becomes very aggravating. So with the grief process and the crying, my tears don't bring him back. So in the beginning, those are my thoughts. Like, what am I crying for? He's not coming back. But as I continue on this journey, I talk to other, women who are grieving their losses of their husband, they're like, embrace the process. There's no way to get through this journey but to go through it. Don't try to take shortcuts. Don't think that you should be feeling a particular way because it's been over a year or it's been 2 years. Because 2 years sometimes can feel like just 2 days, that it happened 2 days ago.
Right.
So my advice would be, take your time, embrace the journey. Just because you embrace it doesn't mean that you're enjoying it. You're just allowing yourself to feel what it is you're feeling in that moment and at that time, because it's okay. And it's important to have a support system. Um, I know some people, may not feel like they have someone that they can talk to, even if that means getting counseling. Um, I think that would be therapeutic. Joining maybe a support group if you don't have anyone, within your immediate circle, that you can talk to. Um, Find other women who are going through the same thing you are. The grief group that I joined a week after my husband passed away has been very, very helpful. Some of the advice that they were giving me, I'm like, these people are crazy. How am I going to do this? They always told me it's not going to feel as heavy. Hate to admit it, but that is true. As time goes on, it doesn't feel as heavy. But then there are some days where it does. I just allow it to be whenever it comes.
What do you want your daughter to know about her dad?
How much he loved her before she was even born, before he even knew she was a she. We didn't know what the sex was. He was just so ready to be a dad again, to have a family, because of, after being married for 8 years, we tried in the beginning, it didn't happen. And he always would say, it'll happen when it's supposed to happen. I'm like, well, it's not just going to happen if we don't, do anything about it. So I want her to know how much he loved her before she was even born. And that if he had a say in any of this, he would definitely be there for her each and every day. And even now, I'll, like I said, point pictures, and I'm like, your daddy loved you before you were even born. And she looks at me, and then she looks back at the picture, and then she looks at me again, and then she'll go on and do something else. So that I take
She's
that as her.
processing it.
I
Yeah.
was gonna say, I take that as her processing, and then she goes on about her business and does something else.
Is there anything about your grief journey that I didn't ask that you want to share?
Um, no, I think I kind of was able to give a glimpse of what this journey entails. I think I've hopefully been able to, help someone else, and just to know that no loss is the same. No loss is the same. It will look different for everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think even in losing a spouse, it looks different, right? I look at my mother and she's grieving, but she was with her husband for 43 years. He was older, he was ill, very different experience than what you're going through.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for sharing such an intimate part of your life with us. And like you said, I'm positive that your story is going to impact other people. And I am praying for a guilty verdict for you, and that this case doesn't drag on, because I want you to be able to move to the next part of your journey.
Yes.
And it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
The guilty verdict is not going to change, the outcome of this particular situation, but at least it will give you some peace of mind, I would hope.
That's what I'm hoping for, and I thank you for that. I really do. And thank you for the opportunity to be able to talk a little bit about my husband.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We love hearing about him. We love hearing about Black men who are doing positive things and loving on their wives and on their kids. And I think it's unfortunate that he was taken so soon.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
To my viewers, I want to thank you for listening and or watching today. As always, may your heart be filled with the brightest of sunflowers, even on the cloudiest of days. Because remember that the sun will shine again. Wishing you love and positive vibes. Until next time.